Hello, everyone. In this video, I'm going to look at this Jupiter and Aries transit and highlight 4 particular phases that I feel are particularly essential for this Jupiter and Aries transit. It's a short transit. We have Jupiter entered Aries in December and will ingress into Taurus in May. So it's very much Aries energy. It's quick, it's fast, it's making a very big impact. So let's look at what's happening within this transit so we can really understand where we're going later in this year when Jupiter's moving into Taurus. And I want to introduce this by just offering the perspective that what's happening in Aries is experience. Nothing is sort of stable. There isn't a crystallization or certainty of direction. The growth with Jupiter in Aries is really gauging our own intuition, having the courage to make new choices. There's an opportunity, a potential for greater growth, greater realization, greater learning. And we all feel that within our own life. And so there's that calling to trust our own personal sense of growth, our potential, and to trust our intuition, to have courage in saying, I'm going to do this. That means I'm not doing this. I'm making this choice. And we have to be open to where it leads. We have to be open to all the different lessons that happen with Jupiter and Aries, dealing with the energy of immediacy, going too far too quickly, coming back, reintegrating. There can be a feeling like opportunities are passing us by and that Jupiter and Aries is calling us within to really reflect upon what is it I really want to be doing? What can I do to get there right now? But what's happening in Aries is it's very instigating. It's very stimulating. There are many experiences. And we learn more about what it is we're really wanting just through engaging in the process. So Aries initially, in particular in the earlier degrees of Aries, is pretty random. We don't necessarily have a very intelligent or refined awareness of what it is we're wanting yet. Right? Of course, we all have that to some degree in our own lives, but relative to this transit, there's a lot to learn. Like we're going to really learn a lot about what we want, where we want to go. But when we don't really have that refined awareness, there is a lot of acting, a lot of making choices, and the consequences of those choices will bring us more awareness. Like, oh, okay, I wasn't being totally honest with myself there. Oh, yes, okay, that worked. I really want that. And now I can understand more about where I want to go. Let's go bigger next time. Next time, let's do even more. Let's take on more. Let's go for a bigger possibility. There's a growing of self-discovery here. So we just need to be willing to start, right? To start somewhere. What's in front of us? What's calling us forward? To take the plunge, to be willing to have the experience of learning and growing and realizing. So let's take a look at some of the essential transits, in my view, of this Jupiter and Aries movement. So let's turn here. This is the final one. January 20th is the first one that I highlighted. I fixed Jupiter to the ascendant here. This is the week when both Mercury stationed direct and Mars stationed direct. They're all stationing direct within 6 days of each other, okay? This is not a Jupiter transit, it's a Mercury and a Mars transit. However, they're both aspecting and very connected to Jupiter. Okay, this Mercury and Mars, they're both stationing direct within a week. Both of them relating to the Mercury and the Gemini archetype speak to a sort of clarification of a lot of perspective, conversation, information. There's something that's beginning to crystallize, and then the Mars says, act on it, move forward, time to put it into motion, okay? Mars is sort of stationing at this loose sextile to Jupiter, and it's also the ruler of Jupiter, Aries. And Mercury is stationing in a pretty tight square to Jupiter and to Chiron, right? This says, okay, I got some new information and perspective. It might feel kind of chaotic or disorganized. Start, right? To me, this is really the beginning of when we really start to feel the potency, the lived experience of this Jupiter energy because of the strong relationship to the stationing Mercury and Mars. We also see this is just before an Aquarius new moon, which will be very close to Pluto, right? So the very transitional point of the sun moving from Capricorn to Aquarius, I feel are a very powerful turning point. And by the way, it's useful to note the eclipses, and we'll see this in a moment, that will happen later this year, will be squaring this point. So this is basically the point where the sun is at the midpoint of the two eclipses. Eclipses always happen 6-month intervals when the sun is on either node. Thus, we're going to have the two midpoints to the eclipses when the sun is at the midpoint of both nodes. And this is also when the nodes move the quickest. So this is also a very powerful time where the core evolutionary dynamic of the two eclipses this year, which are really powerful because they're involving Pluto, are really highlighted. So I see the latter part of the Capricorn and early Aquarius sun journey being where some of the core themes of this Jupiter transit and even 2023 really are starting to be understood and used, acted upon. Now, the next transit is when Jupiter joins Chiron. During those couple of weeks, Venus will also be moving over those planets. Meaningful to note, Venus is the ruler of the North Node. So there's a lot of energy awakening from the point of view of Venus in terms of what is my direction, what are my values, where am I going, how am I internalizing all of this new activity, all of these new insights in a personally meaningful way. How do I want to really claim it and own it for myself? Jupiter joining Chiron can bring a deep quality of tenderness to all of this. See, this is how I want to translate it. We can have vision and insight for where we're going in life, opportunities that are available for us. And there are two dimensions that can really emerge with the Jupiter-Chiron transit. One, it can reflect where we don't feel adequate within ourselves. Who am I to want this? Who am I to go for it? Am I capable? Am I strong enough? Am I just lying to myself, right? So there can be a deep quality of self-doubt. And that doesn't say don't do it. Don't try it. It says there's tenderness here and take that with you. Okay, so really what's emerging latter part of February into the first couple weeks of March is a sort of initiation into our calling for courage, to trust ourselves and to recognize, yes, there might be doubt that emerges in all of this, and that's okay. The other dimension that can arise with this Chiron Jupiter is we can find ourselves going way overboard and hurting ourselves or other people, making rash decisions, being overly aggressive, getting way ahead of ourselves. And the Chiron dimension will bring us into a deep awareness of our own heart, of our own tenderness, of our own limitations. And it can feel like I've gone too far, I've collapsed, I've caused too much damage, I'm not fit for this. And again, this can be an opportunity to cultivate a deep humility and awareness that says, yes, there is an opportunity here. There is a calling for new movement. And do it with your heart, do it with love, do it with compassion. Recognize that what you're doing will bring healing, not just to your life, but to other people as well. And if you've made mistakes, learn from it and allow it to bring more humility, but don't stop. Whatever that is for each one of us, there is a calling here, and it does ask for self-love, self-trust, courage, self-valuing, like, especially with Venus involved. There's a very strong emphasis here on really trusting our own value and purpose. Now, it's meaningful to note as well that at this time, Saturn just enters Pisces, and Jupiter is it's moving into a semi-square, a new phase semi-square crescent, moving from a new phase to a crescent phase semi-square with Saturn. So that also brings a sense of, and it's interesting because it's in the middle of Aries. So there are several dimensions here to unpack. It all points to the same piece. There is a refining going on. The otherwise randomness that we might be feeling right now in terms of there's a lot of possibilities, we don't quite know where it's going. This semi-square with Saturn says there is some sort of crystallization beginning, and actually it's guided from a higher source. Right? Spirit, like the greater truth of who we are, is guiding the journey, teaching us, guiding us along the way. And maybe the Jupiter insights are limited. We only see a small part of the picture. We comprehend some part of it. This is saying we have a purpose. We're not lost, and it's healing and it's meaningful. And just trust where we're going. I think this semi-square with Saturn really teaches us to recognize the steps we're taking now, the seeds we're planting, the actions that we're establishing right now. They're maybe hidden, they're underground. We can't necessarily see the long-term potential, but it's valuable enough to feel clean and in integrity and in alignment with our choices. Even if it's scary, even if it feels like we're making big changes or really needing to trust ourselves when it means no one else can trust us, right? We have to just know what we're doing. It says, rely upon an inner sense of rightness that can't come from the outside. And if we're acting in alignment, acting with love, acting with integrity, or following our inner compass, we'll see the fruits of that later on. I think this is a big calling for a lot of trust and faith in the value in just really tending to the moment. Okay, so let's move on to the next transit. This to me is like the essence. As we can tell, since passing Chiron, Jupiter is moving closer and closer to a square to Pluto. By this time, Pluto has already entered Aquarius. And so this March, April time is a very powerful time. Pluto enters Aquarius. Pluto is really tightening a square to the nodes. And it's been squaring the nodes for a while, but it's squaring the nodes now within the fixed axis. And here we have the first eclipse of this particular season. So this is the first eclipse, is a solar eclipse happening at the latter degrees of Aries, very close to the nodes. And also this eclipse is exactly where the nodes will be when Pluto is in an exact square to the nodes later in the year, just a few months later. Jupiter is conjunct this new moon and approaching a conjunction to the North Node. Okay, this is a powerful eclipse that I would say is really like the one of the core initial shakers of 2023. And it's the last really big hoorah, the last really big Jupiter event before it ingresses into Taurus. So there are two things. Recognizing Jupiter is moving towards Pluto, it's really saying there's an evolutionary process that's occurring right now, truly asking us to trust our intuition and to dive very, very deeply. We have to understand, relative to the Pluto-Jupiter relationship, that there is always a limitation to our philosophical understanding of who we are and where we're going in life. Our cosmology and comprehension of reality is always going to be limited. We're always going to be at a certain evolutionary edge. And so the feeling of fear and stuckness and limitation can be very strong as well, but the opportunity to dig deeper, not get stuck in the externals of our life, really take this as a time, as a practice to turn to the soul, to turn within, right? To seek the teachings that come from knowing who we are and trusting the rightness of the present moment. This can really speak to a calling to trust a greater movement of our own soul that might feel so fast and so scary and so beyond our understanding. And we just need to really trust it and not be afraid of where it's going. Courage comes up incredibly strongly here. Being on the new moon eclipse conjunct the North Node, it does emphasize this quality of what's starting right now. Okay, if we're not reacting, but we're digging very deeply into our own soul guidance and we're just trusting the next moment, willing to learn, there is something very powerful initiating right now. We might not know yet where it's going. I think this transit does not speak very strongly to a clear sense of long-term purpose. It says, act, trust yourself. And there's a refinement that's beginning, right? There's been a lot of new experience happening over the past several months, moving to April with this Jupiter and Aries transit. And we have to be willing to just take it to the next step. Where's Jupiter transiting in your natal chart? Now, there's something about Jupiter. Very often, Jupiter says there's expansion if we let go of something. Right? Where's Mars in your chart? Because Mars rules Aries. This is always a very useful gauge throughout the entire Jupiter in Aries transit. It will say, where can we make choices that will actually help in eliminating anything in our life that's keeping us in the way of greater potential and expansion? This is especially heightened on the eclipse, which is very much about energy moving in, new energy coming out. Old energy coming in, new energy coming out, right? There is a portal of great energetic movement during these eclipses. So we sometimes have to be willing to take radical breaks, make significant, powerful changes, or on the other end, make choices like commitments, radical decisions that if we don't make these radical commitments or choices or decisions for something new, the world won't open up for us. Right? So the indecision of Aries can be very heightened here. And this eclipse point squaring Pluto can be emphasizing, where do we need to be decisive in order for the doors to open? You know, sometimes Jupiter transits can feel chaotic and like everything's bad. Like it's not expansive and not wonderful and not, you know, not about growth. And it's because it's highlighting exactly where we need to claim a deeper quality of agency and choice. In particular in Aries, we have to be willing to make a decision. Sometimes the evolutionary journey is waiting for our basic decision. And really, when it comes down to it, our decision, I think this is essential with Jupiter and Aries, because we can get stuck with, do I want this? Do I want that? Like, what's our gauge for our choices? Bring your energy up. Don't let this be about lower desire, because that's going to be the issue. Our limitations in our philosophical, cosmological awareness of life will be limited by the fixation of our own desires, right? That which we're obsessed with. Elevate it. Go deeper into our soul. What do we want most? See, our deeper desires for evolution are always going to be confronted by the lower desires. They're happening. They're both inside of us. And I think the evolutionary journey, this is really one of the core teachings of Jeffrey Wolf Green, is the gradual exhaustion of all desires until the only one remained, which is the desire to reunite with our source. But we're all engaging with where we're at. Right? We're playing, I want this, I want that. And it's like, what of all of that is helpful for our growth, right? Will take us further into our spiritual being, right? Versus what is actually keeping us lower. Only we can know that. All desires are either being exhausted or being generated. And if they're being generated, it's about, is it the next step along my soul path? We don't jump to the absolute, right? Is the next experience, the next thing, the next opportunity, the next expansion, is this where I'm going to find more of myself and find more of my strength, more of my capacity, more of my eternal power and beingness? Or am I beating a dead horse and just compensating by trying to add more? So we really need to look inside of ourselves and really ask ourselves, what do we really want? And thus, what is really worth making powerful decisions for? And then less than a month later, Jupiter finally enters Aries. And just take a look at this transit. I mean, this is just after a very powerful eclipse season. The sun moving through Taurus. The next eclipse, by the way, this is just before the new moon. So 2 weeks prior, the full moon eclipse was actually happening on Uranus. So this whole season, just before Jupiter enters Aries, is incredibly stimulating. So Jupiter finally enters Taurus, and look, it's moving towards a square the entire time that it's in Aries. Okay. So a lot of the randomness and instigation, maybe even the messiness, and I don't know where this is going, and the going too far or not going far enough in Aries, that's going to clarify and really begin to ground with Jupiter and Taurus. And I'm just wanting to end this perspective on Jupiter and Aries with what it really means for Jupiter to enter Taurus after all of this. Okay. We've gone on the journey. We've made essential changes. We've surprised ourselves. We've cultivated courage. We've gone too far. We've started over again. We've really refined and clarified what we want, what is most important to us. We've cultivated self-leadership. Now, let's see what remains. What within all of that was just a flash in the pan, right? What within all of that was just the fireworks of possibilities and experience, or maybe necessary experience. But what do? We take that experience and we bring it within. We internalize it. And we give ourselves the time to say, okay, what do I want to keep? Right? You go on the journey and there are all kinds of experiences and relationships and opportunities and teachers and events. And you take that inside and you ask, what do I want to keep inside and really cultivate and sustain long term? Right? That's what Jupiter in Taurus is all about. And this Jupiter in Taurus is starting off very powerfully. It's on the North Node, it's squaring Pluto. So this is really speaking to a profound grounding and stabilization. What do I want to grow long term? So if we just understand this in context of all of the Aries transit, in context with what's happening afterwards, we can really appreciate that all of this Aries energy is really serving the purpose of bringing us into a new, fresh field of profound, expanded self-awareness, self-discovery, self-realization, so that this long-term journey, and Jupiter will spend a good year or so in Taurus. It's going to spend a long time in Taurus. It's going to go up till 15 degrees and then move retrograde. So there's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of deeper activity. It's going to, as per Taurus, interestingly enough, it's going to be slower. It's going to steep. It's going to spend more time there. So we'll have a long opportunity to really define and clarify what makes our life personally meaningful. And I would say it's really at this point in the year where the volume gets turned up, right? The nodes are moving backwards to a tight exact square with Pluto. Pluto's already retrograde. They're going to square each other at the very latter degrees of the cardinal axis. Soon Venus will go retrograde. Venus being the ruler of the transiting South Node in Libra, which will be happening later this year. It's a really profound core essential change. And so hopefully just kind of tuning into the energy of Aries and this Jupiter transit is helpful just as a preparatory perspective for the deeper long-term growth that's actually beginning to unfold for the latter half of 2023. So hopefully this is helpful. Reminder, we have the Heart and Soul Centered Astrology chart interpretation courses part 2. The Essentials course is part 1. It's a full year training program. Take only part 1 or the full year. This is a beautiful, immersive learning experience. It's also a spiritual practice with community, return alumni, weekly meetings, forum, video content for anyone that is either new to the teachings of evolutionary astrology as taught by Jeffrey Wolf Green, or is already studied in it, but wants to go deeper, wants to train in this work with a teacher that you trust from the ground up. You can learn more about that in the description below. And for those that are already deeply studied and practice in this work, I have a chart practice work, student practice course happening also at the same time. Only for those that are ready for that level of learning, application is necessary. Learn more about that below and feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. I have various tuition assistance options available for those who need it. And that's one of the deeper values that I have. So I can make these teachings available for anyone that really wants to study and do this work. We also have the option of donating if you want to support those who are called to take this work but do not have the means. Okay, thank you so much for watching.